fucking time that a turkey had its say.
Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to interview one of the original member of jazz from the anarcho punk band Virus. They're from the 80s. When I first heard Virus, it was when I was in high school. It was called We Won't Be Your Fucking Poor album. It was a double album, and they had a song on that compilation. It was a really amazing compilation. And also, you could also read about the Virus on the Day the Country Died book. This book is really cool. A lot of people don't know about this, but the whole 80s anarcho punk movement from England was my inspiration when I was in high school. It made me who I am today. So that's why I have a lot of respect for all the UK 80s anarcho punk movement, because it also brought down here in the Southern California in the 80s when we were in high school. It was a good inspiration to us. Jazz, thank you for being with us here.
Hi, how you doing? That's fine. No worries.
Really good. It's been 11 months since I interviewed any other anarcho punk bands from England.
Yeah.
So we're going to do 10 questions with Jazz.
Okay, sure.
Okay, question number 1. Jazz, can you tell us about yourself, an example, what your passions are, what keeps you involved in the punk scene, hobbies, if you have any favorite band and book?
Sure, yeah. Okay, well, I'm 53, and we, like many other people who are in our sort of mid-50s, got inspired by punk in the sort of late 70s. Probably, if I'm honest, due to bands like the more sort of mainstream ones that you would see, say, on the telly on a Thursday night on Top of the Pops, like say the Damned and the Ruts and the Skids and all that. And then you know, lots of people were into punk for a while and dropped out, but if you were into punk and didn't drop out, you kind of found all these underground bands eventually, sort of in the very early 80s. You know, I first read about Crass in a magazine called Smash Hits, of all things. They had an independent chart, and Crass were always in that. And you know, I didn't know who they were in 1980, but you saw the names of the bands. I think I first heard Crass in 1981. Well, I did first hear Crass in 1981, and bands on the labels. So yeah, that's how I got into that. And for me, what I liked about them was that they were political, because lots of the punk bands back before that, although were political, they were a little bit sort of having fun, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you know, they were singing daft lyrics or whatever, you know, whereas they kind of Crass type of bands wrote lyrics that you could kind of be inspired by, and you know, alternative lifestyle. So that's kind of what got me into it, really. In terms of being in the punk scene, I think once you discover Crass and you kind of make those decisions about, you know, becoming a vegetarian or a vegan, for example, or believing in animal rights, they never kind of leave you if you're true to it. That's it. Once you make that decision, that's it for life, for me and for lots of other people I know. So yeah, you know, and like forming a band was the kind of next thing to do. You know, everyone said, oh, get yourself a band, you know, all the bands sort of and that. And so we started our band when we were about 14. You know, we weren't very good, but then that didn't matter. That wasn't what it's about. It was just having a go. And, you know, that's how it was. And I should say that, you know, we live in a very remote area. So punk bands never really came to where we grew up and lived. There was a very small sort of scene around village halls and pub skittle alleys and back rooms and things like that. And two of the bands that were from around this area were the Mob and the Subhumans. And obviously the Warminster scene, like, so Subhumans, A-Heads, Organised Chaos, all of those bands are in that book you mentioned there, I think. And, you know, so they would play in, like, you know, so I saw the Mob in, you know, a village hall in the middle of Somerset, in the middle of nowhere. Subhumans, lots of places, you know. So there was that going on, but if you wanted to see, say, like a bigger band, say like the Damned, everyone knows the Damned, they'd never come here. You'd have to go to, say, Bristol, which is about an hour and 20 minutes drive away, to see them, or they might play in Plymouth, which is like 2.5 hours. So there wasn't much going on around here in terms of bigger bands, but we had our own little scene, so that was really cool. In terms of favorite bands, I haven't really got one as such. They just kind of all, you know, I like one a lot one week and then a lot and the next week. But book, I'm a graphic designer by trade. So like the person I really like, I got a book, it's like a sort of house brick, really thick, on Saul Bass, who was this American designer. I don't know if you've heard of him, but that's my favorite book, just because it's got all his design work in it. And he's like really cool, 50s and 60s graphic designer. And he, you know, he sort of broke the mold and created a lot of things. And actually, if you know of Alfred Hitchcock films, he actually designed a lot of the title sequences for the Hitchcock films, and even directed the shower scene in Psycho. So yeah, his book of work would be my favorite, because I'm a very visual person.
Question number 2. Per Wikipedia, when you look up your band, it says Virus are an English punk rock band formed in 1983 that promote and support anarchism, vegetarianism, anti-nuclear, and environmental issues. That being said, in the UK in the 1980s, the anarcho-punk scene was large. Can you tell us about how it was over there at that time from your perspective, and what activism were the punks there involved in?
Yeah, sure. I don't know who wrote that on Wikipedia. We didn't, but you know, it's nice that someone made the effort. But yeah, the 80s, in terms of activism, it's very different from what it is now. Because, for example, if you think about things like Extinction Rebellion now, and say Greta Thunberg, what she's doing is very mainstream and it's reported a lot. Yeah. But like environmental activism, for example, back in the 80s, you know, was kind of unreported and unheard of. The sort of activism that we got involved with, we went on like the Stop the City marches, for example, in London, that I think you might have read about, that were kind of organized by CRASS. And basically, with those, they were like very much against like the Bank of England and corporate money laundering and, you know, big business and things like that. So we went on those and got arrested, as virtually every punk did, kind of thing. You went on, did that. We did lots of hunt sabbing, because we live in the area where there's lots of hunts going on, and, you know, we would endeavor to do our best to stop, you know, the hunt. Sometimes we'd succeed, a lot of the times we'd fail and take a beating for it. But I kind of got involved in a lot of my own kind of doing my own thing, where I had a job at a shit factory. It didn't really matter at the time, but it sounds stupid what I'm going to tell you, but it's the kind of thing that I think that everyone who can make their own little bit of difference can go a long way. So there was this Coke vending machine there, and at the time they just threw all the cans away. And I was like, that's madness. You can recycle that metal, you know? And basically, I just started my own thing and put like a box there and said, please don't throw the cans in the bin, throw them in this box and I'll recycle them. And they all thought I was mad back then. So I've been really into like environmental issues and recycling and all that for a long, long time. And eventually they all got on board, and I used to just fill up the transit van and take it up to the scrapyard and not even get any money for it. I didn't want any money for it. I was just like, you know, reuse this stuff. We waste so much stuff, and we've got to think about that. And I kind of got that from punk rock as well back then. So I've kind of always been into that, and I still, you know, I'm a sort of obsessive recycler in a way. I can't help it. I just think that we've got to do something about the waste this we all are involved with. So yeah, I'm sort of active in a lot of that. Still do a lot of support for Hunt Saboteurs. I mean, we've just given a track to this benefit CD. I don't know if you can see that. So yeah, we do all of the sort of usual things, lots of benefit gigs and lots of donating tracks for punk compilations that have got good causes, whether that would be the homeless through to, food banks, through to animal rights, whatever, we're still all involved very much in all that. And, our songs relate to that.
Question number 3. Since we heard about the punk scene in the 1980s, can you tell us about the punk scene now, before COVID, including whether the punks are involved in activism still?
Yeah. I mean, pre-COVID, the anarcho punk scene in England was quite, there's quite a lot of gigs going on, and lots of the gigs were benefit gigs, so they'd be like for the local animal sanctuary or the local food bank or something like that. We've done a lot of them. Lots of the sort of 80s anarcho punk bands have sort of reformed in the last 10 years or so. Some have been really great for the scene. People like Anthrax, who run Grow Your Own Records, have been amazing, really. What Gary's done there, he's like set up this label and put out records, and all the records are sort of handmade covers and things like that. Real pure sort of DIY punk spirit, which there's a lot still in this country. But then of course, I'm not knocking them when I say this, but there are lots of bands who aren't into that, who are into just sort of doing the kind of big rebellion shows, who only reform to do that kind of thing, and not really into kind of the grassroots politics and stuff that we are. So yeah, some of the scene is very much still involved heavily in activism. I mean, this little CD that I'm only holding this one up because it's come out in the last couple of weeks. This has been done by my friend, and I sort of helped him get some of the bands for it. And, we raised 600 quid for the local Hunt Saboteurs group, which doesn't sound much, but they don't get any support from anywhere else. And that's enough to keep their Land Rover on the road for a few months. So, we've just got to do what we can.
Question number 4. In the 1980s, a lot of anarcho-punk bands had a strong stance against apartheid in South Africa and fighting racism. Do you still see punk being anti-racist, or have things changed? Are or were punks involved in, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement or immigrant rights?
Well, yeah, we were obviously very anti-racist and still are. There was a very unhealthy element in the punk scene in the 80s, where like the British movement and sort of more, I don't want to tarnish them all with the same brush because that's not fair. The Oi scene, because some of the Oi bands definitely weren't like that. Roddy Marino of The Oppressed, is a perfect example of, he was very anti-racist. But I think a few of the Oi bands got caught up in that whole thing, maybe without really knowing what was going on. I don't know. But for us, we were never like that, and actually we've got a song that we're going to record for our new record, which is about the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't know if you're aware of the protests in Bristol last year, where the slave trader statue of Edward Colston was pulled down, and they've been the people in the city have been trying to get it taken down for a long time. But some of the people didn't want it taken down. And in the end, there was a big demonstration, and the crowd pulled it down. And it was a great moment. It was a real sort of like, actually, we can take back control of these things and reclaim, the streets for ourselves. And that was a brilliant moment. And I've written a song about that whole day, and the kind of a sort of celebration, really, that actually you can get out there and take down these statues to these people that have been there and never questioned. So I think not all of that was punks. You know, there were a few punks there for sure, but there were lots of young people who were engaged with it, and that's great to see, whether they like punk music or not. You know, if they're for the same cause as you are, then I don't mind if they're punks, skinheads, mods, rockers, nothings, whatever. You know, it's good that they're actually believing in something and getting involved and doing it.
Question number 5. Since members of the band Virus has been vegetarian, I'd like to know, if so, how has the animal rights movement changed in the comparison to the 1980s?
Okay, I think people, yeah, in the 80s, it was things like vivisection was very sort of underground and hush hush. You know, it wasn't reported. You know, and I think punk, you know, people like Conflict really brought that to the attention of not only the punk community, but, you know, they pushed that out, and even bands like the Smiths picked up on it with their Meat is Murder album, or whatever it was called. I don't know. I'm not really a fan of the Smiths, but so it did become a sort of a big topic, really. And yeah, I don't think it's ever gone away. You know, it's definitely not gone away in the punk scene. You know, people still sing about animal rights, because not a lot has changed in terms of the things like the LD50 test, which is the vivisection test, where they have a select number of animals and they give them enough poison to kill 50 of the animals, and then the other 50 are then put down anyway. I mean, it's barbaric what goes on. I think there's a lot more now out there in terms of cruelty-free products and cosmetics or shower gels, or, you know, whatever. It tends to be a lot of that kind of thing. Back in the day, there was hardly anything, you know, so that's a positive. I try to look at things as well as being a positive move forward if we can. So I do think that animal rights are still very much a political topic that people are interested in, and because the mainstream has picked up on veganism and animal-free cruelty products, I think that's a good thing.
Question number 6. As member of the band Virus are vegetarian, can you tell us why animal welfare and rights are important to you and the band? When did you first become involved in this movement, and why?
Well, I think if I go back, the first time I really became aware of it was when the Flux of Pink Indians EP, Tube Disaster, came out, which I bought at the time. And on the B side was Sick Butchers and Background and Malfunction, which were songs about animal rights, you know, and that kind of made, you know, and the picture sleeve had a photo of an abattoir with a pig being cut in half with this kind of chainsaw electrical thing, you know, and it just made you think, you know, it's like, well, where does this come from? You know, because I think a lot of the time before, people didn't associate, for example, a pig and then what they were eating on their plate as like bacon or whatever, because like Conflict said, they're hidden behind false names. You don't go into a shop and say, I'll have some dead pig. It's called pork or it's called bacon. So yeah, I became aware of it then, and then I became vegetarian in 1983. And again, it was just one of those natural things where, you know, if you were into that kind of, you couldn't really, well, you could be anarcho punk and say not be vegetarian because there's no rules in punk, but lots of the punks who were into that sort of immediately thought, yeah, that's you know, that's barbaric, you know, we can't continue with that. So yeah, I became involved like with that, and then Conflict sort of took it on to the next level from what Flux had started with that To a Nation of Animal Lovers EP, where, you know, that was brutal, the inside of that, and that really did show you like this is what is happening. So yeah, it's those kind of things that made you think, and I think it's good to think about things. I think it's really important and question things, because once you start questioning things is when you can actually start changing things. So I sort of owe those animal rights beliefs to you know, the anarcho punk scene. That's where I became aware of it.
Question number 7. Can you share how you have been handling, surviving through, and dealing with the pandemic COVID?
Yeah, I mean, we're quite lucky. Obviously, we live very remotely in the countryside in England. So the nearest big town to me, like big town, you know, is probably half an hour's drive away. So I've got fields surrounding my little house. I can go and walk in. So in effect, that sort of effect, I haven't been affected too much by it because, you know, it's very rural here. But obviously, if I need to go to the local shop, I have to wear a mask and all that, and that's fine. And because I'm in my 50s, I've had my first jab, which is fine. My wife got COVID, which was really eye-opening and frightening, actually. And she was really rough for quite a while. She's better now. And my dad passed away during this lockdown. So he didn't die of COVID, fortunately. He died of pneumonia. So it's been a bit of a up and down journey for me, to be honest. But I just think that we've just got to try and get through it and think positive that we'll come out of this, hopefully. And, you know, things will never go back to what they were like, I don't think, because it's changed the way people think about things a lot and feel. And hopefully it might make people realize that, you know, these things do happen, and we have to be aware of them, and we've got to try and improve the world, because you know, people in India, for example, at the moment are really suffering. You know, we've had it light compared to them, but it's still terrible what's happened. Like I say, we've had 100 and something like 50,000 deaths here. It's crazy. And I know it's been really bad in America as well.
Question number 8. Now that you have been in virus for so many years, can you share with us what appreciate from your experience being in the band, including any favorite shows or memories you may have?
Yeah, well, you know, when we started the band, I said we were 14. I started it with my best friend at the time, who was the guitar player, who sadly died. When did he die? About 13 years ago. And he still was my best friend then. And 2 older guys. But yeah, being in a band, it was just one of those things you kind of did. And it was great, you know, because we met other people in bands, and the thing was as well, you know, in the punk scene then, for us, a gig was you know, quite a big event, because we didn't do that many when we first started going, but we ended up playing lots of faraway places around. You know, we'd go off and play in London, which was 2 and a bit hour drive, or we go and play in Swansea, which was 3 or 4 hour drive. So we'd meet lots of other people, and it was really great that, and you felt part of a sort of movement or a community that, you know, we were all felt the same, which is really great. Because actually when we were young punks, we kind of felt a bit lost, because around here there weren't many punks, so we were kind of like the real black sheep outcasts. So for us to get in a car and travel 2 hours and then be somewhere with some people who are actually, they're all right, you're all right, you know, and they like you, and that's great, you know. And that's why I still do it. You know, it's really great to go and play a gig and meet up with people who feel the same as you, and have that sort of sense of community that, you know, we can change things if we make the effort. And it's going to be hard work, and we won't change everything, but we can make little changes. And I suppose favorite shows, well, I'm trying to think, you know, some back then I can't remember at all. I think probably the 2 or 3 that really stand out back then would have been the Subhumans, when the Subhumans came to play in Gillingham, which is where we're from. And I'll never forget the landlord saying, "Oh, yeah," we did it in the back room of a pub, and he's like, "Oh, no one's going to turn up to see you and your mates and your punk band, blah blah blah." And then, like, it was about 300 people rammed into this room, and he was like, afterwards, can you play again next week? So that was quite funny. And then we did a great one with Wretched from Italy and Disorder that the Warminster lot put on over in Warminster. That was a mad event, you know. Lots of very funny stories going on with Disorder that night. And then of course the big one we did with Conflict in Salisbury, where the British movement turned up and thought they were going to kill all the punks in town, and actually Conflict wiped the floor with them and sent them packing with their tails between their legs. That was a real sight, because, you know, we'd had a lot of beatings from the sort of far right skinhead thugs, boneheads, I should say, bonehead thugs. So it was nice to see them get a bit of just desserts. And nowadays, like, there's no aggro at shows, so that's great. And yeah, it's just nice to really to meet up with. I mean, I know lots of people in the scene, so we end up playing with, like, say, Anthrax a lot. And it's always great to see them, or we play with the A-Heads a lot. And, you know, I've known these people years, so it's just like meeting up with old friends and, you know, having a good time, really.
Question number 9. I heard a lot that anarcho punk wouldn't be what it became without Crass. Do you agree or disagree, and why?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's very true that, you know, lots of us discovered what we call anarcho-punk via Crass and Crass Records. But what I think is important to remember is obviously that Crass were very influential to us at that time. But they never said, be like us. What they said is, like, take your own thing from this and do your own thing. And that was really important, because I think lots of bands, and we were probably guilty of it at the time as well, kind of got fixated on what they were doing. What are Crass doing? We've got to be like that. And it wasn't until, you know, a few years later, actually, that we kind of thought, actually, well, we just need to do what we want to do, because that's the whole ethos and idea behind it. So Crass were hugely important, and seeing them live was amazing, you know, because it wasn't just a gig, it was an experience of, like, say, you felt like a sort of a bit lost, because there might only be 4 or 5 punks around your little town. But then you'd go to, you know, you go to, say, Exeter to see Crass, which is like an hour and a half on the train away, and suddenly you're there with, you know, 300 or 400 other people that are there for this Crass gig, and it's amazing. And, you know, Crass were amazing because they would be in the crowd talking to you. I mean, we stayed afterwards because we didn't get the train back to where we live. The last train had gone, so we were going to sleep on the platform, but we stayed in the hall as long as possible because it was warmer in the hall than obviously it was outside. And in the end, we ended up talking to Crass for about an hour and helping them load all their gear in their van, and, you know, off they went, and, you know, chatted to Flux as well, because Flux were there. And yeah, it's just great. Actually, I've got something to show you, because I thought you might ask me that. So these are the sort of badges that Flux and Crass used to give away at their gigs. They'd come out in the audience with buckets full of these badges. So these original badges, these are the original badges from when I used to go and see Crass and Flux of Pink Indians and, you know, Conflict, whoever. But it was, I just kept them all. And when you said about it, I thought, oh yeah, I'll show him these, because I'm never going to throw them away or anything like that, or sell them. But yeah, there's, you know, and like there's like a big handful here of them, and like they would come around with buckets after the gig and just say, like, help yourselves. And that was a real nice gesture of them, you know. I thought, you know, they were giving something back to the people that were kind of supporting them. So yeah, they were very, very influential. But like I say, what is important to remember is that you take your own thing from it and then you kind of develop your own ideas. Just don't be a clone.
That's cool. Question number 10. What message would you like to leave the youth with, or to encourage other people?
Well, I think the youth are doing all right generally, with people like Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion. I know I've mentioned them earlier, but I think that, you know, they are highlighting very serious issues and bringing it to the forefront and making it mainstream. Whereas, you know, anarcho punks back in the day couldn't have believed if we'd have got any kind of coverage like that. And of course, the thing is with mainstream coverage, it actually makes, hopefully, it makes people think. And they might think, you know, some people will hate Extinction Rebellion and hate Greta Thunberg, but but the same amount of people that hate her, they might actually turn people on to them and think, like, they might think, my daughter, who is 14, she thinks Greta Thunberg's brilliant, you know, and she went to see Greta and talk in Bristol, and you know, I think that's what we need. We need young people like that who are prepared to stand up to people like Donald Trump, you know, good on her, and give him a good old going over. And we need more of that. And same with Extinction Rebellion. You know, I think what they're doing is brilliant. They're really highlighting the issues that actually, you know, global warming, the environmental issues are really important. We've got to address them now. It's going to be too late if we don't. And, you know, political leaders are having to, take notice of what they do. So I'm big with them. And like I say earlier, they don't have to be punk kids to do that. They can be whatever they want, as long as they're making a positive impact. I think that's really important, you know. If they like punk music, even better, you know. But I should imagine that lots of them probably haven't even heard punk music or know what it is. But, you know, even if they haven't, that's still fine. You know, they're out there making a difference, and making a difference is what we can all we can all hope that they can do, you know, because we can't keep doing it forever. We need younger people to step up to the plate and carry on doing what they're doing. I think it's great.
Cool. Thank you so much for the interview. Also, much respect to your original member who passed away, and may your father also rest in peace and everything. I would like to give a shout out to all the anarcho punks from the 80s who used to do fanzine, who did not just bands, zines, and all kinds of stuff. Much respect. It's incredible how the anarcho punk spread all over the world, and it's still going and active and everything. Thank you for the interview.
No worries. I'll talk to you again. You take care. Stay safe.